On today's episode of the Harrison Vapnek Podcast, we're bringing on CBS sports writer, SiriusXM NBA producer David Shepard to come on and talk about his time covering the NBA, what it's like being a producer behind the scenes working in the NBA, his GOAT, is it Michael Jordan or LeBron James, his career in watching basketball from a young age to now, the New York Knicks, he's a Knicks fan, how the Knicks have had a huge season this year. This was recorded about a month ago before they even really popped off, and a lot more. Turned into a great interview with David Shepard. Sit back and relax because it's starting right now. I'm now joined by, from CBS Sports national sports writer and SiriusXM NBA producer David Shepard. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheGoodShepard. David, welcome on.
Harrison, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
So, your main role with SiriusXM, you do NBA producing, you provide headlines, stats for the NBA channel, Mad Dog Sports Radio, you cover live NBA games, you do mixes of music, you get interviews, you book players, you do a lot of the behind-the-scenes roles. We talk to a lot of, on-air people and reporters, but you kind of do some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. So tell us a day of the life of kind of a producer in the NBA.
Sure. Well, basically you have to be aware of everything, 24/7, 7 days a week. It's never ending because, if there's breaking news, well, first of all, you actually have to follow Shams and Woj. You got to follow Mark Stein, Rachel Nichols, David Aldridge. And so it really is a situation where you have to be on the ball. And if there's breaking news, like, for example, if there's a Joel Embiid injury, even if you're not even working that night, you have to be able to, decipher, hey, I know I need a guest the next day because I know everyone's going to want to talk about the hyperextension on Joel Embiid. If there's a situation like a Kyle Lowry potential trade, you have to be on top of that because when there's content on a show, that falls on the producer. If there's a situation that breaks and that topic is not brought up on that show, that doesn't fall on the host. That falls on the producer. So you are the backbone of a show. When it comes to doing a certain read, when it comes to breaking news, when it comes to how compelling the show is itself, the content, that falls on the shoulders of a producer. So, it's basically the hosts have the name on the show. There's certainly the reason why people tune in, but you are the boss, and that's kind of how you have to look at it. I know hosts don't necessarily always want to have that be the case because hosts are big names and they're powerful, and they do determine the ratings, and they certainly determine the dial. But this is your baby as a producer, so you always have to be on alert at all times.
Has there been a time or a good example that some news has broken when you're producing, or if it's a game or a TV show or a radio show, that is, any big news that has broken that you have had to cover?
Yeah, I remember we were doing a post-game show, and I believe it was the Zion game, his rookie season, Summer League. It was Summer League, and I remember he got hurt, and he was basically ruled out for the rest of the Summer League. It was his first game, and he was amazing, but, they wanted to really be careful of him. And then at 1:50, and our show ends it was like 1:57:30, and our show ends at 1:58:30. And we see, there's all kinds of speculation. Where is Kawhi Leonard going to go? Where is Paul George going to go? Those guys were the two big free agents of that particular season, especially Kawhi, especially, the Claw. And so at 1:57:30, Adrian Wojnarowski drops a Woj bomb, the ultimate Woj bomb, in my opinion. Kawhi Leonard decides to sign with the LA Clippers. By the way, the Oklahoma City Thunder are going to trade Paul George to LA. And we had to stay on for an extra hour. I had to make my program director aware. I had to make my executive producer aware. I had to obviously let my host know. Now, fortunately, they were both in studio, so it wasn't hard to kind of relay that message. But had I not done that, that would have been bad. Yeah. Can you imagine? Like, having because basically, for a lot of programming and radio, we have something called the capture hour. And capture hour means basically what we do for that hour is then going to replay for the next 7 or 8 hours until the next live programming. So can you imagine listening to NBA radio for 7 straight hours, and not once is the concept or topic of Kawhi Leonard going to the Clippers brought up?
It's crazy. It's crazy to think about that. And, I think that night also that there was some kind of earthquake on the West Coast, and then the Kawhi news dropped, and the Zion thing happened,
Correct.
and the Paul George thing.
Yep.
That might be one of the
I remember
craziest
that.
nights, really, in what turned out to be a pretty crazy NBA season when there was the pandemic and the bubble. That was really basically the start of it all. I know you do some games covering in person also. What are some of the notable ones that you've had to be in the arena for that you remember?
Repeat that again. What are the normal ways?
Some of the best games you've seen in an arena, because I know you do live games as well.
Sure. Well, so for example, with the arena, it's really cool. I don't even know if this is answering your question, Harrison, but
yeah, it doesn't matter.
Right, there you go. But for me, when you go to the arena, you obviously just want to make sure that you're there early enough, and you kind of have an idea of what you want to go in with storyline. I write for CBS Sports Radio, so you have you understand kind of the mission that you want to accomplish. A lot of people have their own agendas. I don't mean agenda in a bad way, but for example, going into it, if you want to, who's your team?
I like the Miami Heat.
Miami, okay, perfect. Okay, so for me, I know that Jimmy Butler's the main guy.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, right now what's going on in the NBA in terms of overall big picture is the comments that, Myers Leonard made.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those are very critical. So a lot of people may be going in and saying, hey, the Heat are over, 2 games over 500. That's pretty phenomenal. Right? First time they've done that all season.
Yep.
But a lot of people are going to be going in with the mindset of, well, wait a minute, I don't want to ask about that. I want to ask about Myers Leonard. So they're going in thinking, okay, I'm going to look to see the holes that are being filled in when Myers Leonard's not there. So what does Myers Leonard do very well? We know that he screens really well. We know that he can rebound really well. We know that he has the ability to shoot from distance. He's not exactly going to be the quickest playmaker, not exactly going to put the ball on the floor and be, Magic Johnson. And so I'm looking at the Heat saying to myself, how can they fill his role? And that's my angle going into the game. And so I need to know what that is, and I need to constantly be preparing for day one. Hey, let me bring that to the attention of other writers. What is your take on this? How do you feel? So I feel like when you go to games, that is an incredible opportunity to not only push your story, your narrative, but also to kind of pick the brains of your fellow colleagues. And in essence, they're going to also do the same thing. And I think as a writer, you really want to tap into other writers' insights. And, a lot of writers have podcasts and they have their own shows now because so much of what we do in sports is content driven. And writers come up with a lot of good content. So I think that it's such an important facet of going to games. And I hope that returns sooner or later. Obviously, I know we're not doing that right now, but I think going to games is incredibly important, not just to cover, but to build your own brand, your own platform, and to continue to connect and build relationships with like-minded people in the business.
That's an awesome way to look at it. And, you think of games as a reporter, you think about watching the game, but it's kind of seeing the different things. I know reporters always get there early, talk to some of the players, talk to the coaches, talk to even some of the broadcasters there who know the most about the team, who are there every day at practice and, there every day walking in and out. More specifically, a single game, because that answer was fantastic, the one you just gave. Is there one single game that you've been to and you've covered that, wow, that's one of the best basketball games I've ever seen in person?
Thank you. I read that answer out of a book, by the way. Literally verbatim, I have a book in front of me just saying, if Harrison asked the purpose of going to a game, make sure you give this answer. No, in terms of the best game I ever attended, I'd say the most meaningful game was the last game of the season for the Knicks. And, it was Fizdale's last full year with the Knicks. And I just remember that was really impactful because you saw the Pistons clinch. And the reason why it was significant for me was because, a lot of times in the NBA, there's the perception that, players don't necessarily always care so much about the winning aspect, but they care about getting their numbers and they care about getting their salaries. And to see the players on the Pistons clinch, in the final night of the regular season to go to the playoffs, I think it was the first time in 4 or 5 years that they accomplished that. To talk to Andre Drummond, to talk to Zaza Pachulia, to talk to Luke Kennard, they really cared about what happened with their team. They took a lot of pride in it. So I thought that was something that was very cool to witness, and just to see players that make tens of millions of dollars every single year, to kind of see them, their passion for the game, their camaraderie, their excitement. That was something that was really cool. And I remember dealing with Fizdale, and I knew that if Fizdale and the Knicks wasn't going to work out, he was going to be in the media, because that guy can talk, man.
He's been awesome in the media. I know he was a former assistant coach for the Miami Heat. Went to Memphis, then went to ESPN,
Sure.
Then to the Knicks, and I think now he's back at ESPN. He's one of the best analysts and all. I hope he gets back in the NBA as a coaching or assistant sometime in the near future. Let's talk about some current NBA storylines. I know you've been in the New York area for a long time, watching a lot of New York Knicks basketball. They're having one of their best seasons, really, in the past decade or so. What are your thoughts on how the Knicks are playing here in 2021?
I think it's phenomenal. I think it's amazing. I think Julius Randle is absolutely living up to his potential. I think, Quickly's been great. I think Robinson has a high ceiling. I'd like to certainly see him take the next step. I'd like to see Barrett take the next step. We kind of knew he wasn't going to be Zion and he wasn't going to be John Morant, but I would like to see him kind of be at that all-star level. Now, obviously, the guy still has time to see, and we know with, Obi, we know that he hasn't exactly been the most durable guy. Not his fault. It's just, it happened. Michael Jordan missed 85-90% of his second season. So we don't really know what we're getting with Obi Toppin yet. But the way Julius Randle has played, the way that he has, really thrived and succeeded under Tom Thibodeau's system, to see Rose, to see Gibson, it is a very exciting time to be a New York Knick. And Randall's been in the NBA, I want to say, since 2014.
Yep, drafted in 2014.
Right. And he played that one game for the Lakers, and then he got hurt his first game, and so he really didn't have a true rookie season. So to see him live up to his potential, the guy's just 26 years old. He's got his head on straight. He plays hard. He's smart. He's talented. He's giving you 23, 11 a game. There doesn't seem to be any ego there. It's a great time to be a New York Knicks fan. Now, it just goes to show how much Patrick Ewing should be appreciated. Mm-hmm. Because Patrick Ewing was All-NBA first team, All-NBA second team, I believe, 5 times. And they were perennial title contenders. Perennial. I mean, we're talking about a guy that went to 2 NBA finals, not for a John Starks, 2 for 18 performance. He's an NBA champion in 1994, giving the Knicks their first championship in 21 years. Yep. So it just goes to show you, we're excited about the Knicks. It really makes you appreciate Patrick Ewing. Getting to 2 NBA finals, we're excited that the Knicks even make the postseason. I think we've won one postseason in the last 20 years. Do
you think this team can win a postseason series?
I hope, but no. I don't think this is their year, man. But the reason I bring up Patrick Ewing is because that's the thought I have when it comes to the Knicks. Kind of what happened with him the last couple of weeks. That's definitely been a storyline in New York. For him to be, questioned and for him to be stopped, in MSG, it's Patrick Ewing.
He's the best Knick ever.
Greatest player in the history of the franchise.
No, you said it best. He's what happened, the run that Georgetown just made to the conference championship, and now they're in the NCAA tournament. Patrick Ewing, I think, should be more respected from kind of the younger generation, because all we've known, for me, living for 19 years, I've never really seen the Knicks have any much success. You mentioned the one playoff series against Boston, I think, in 2013. You said that you don't think the Knicks can win.
Good. You know your NBA, man.
I know some things. Back to some current NBA.
That was quick, man.
Yeah.
You're not even a Knicks guy. That was impressive.
Seriously. It's because the Heat won the finals that year, and they were. I remember the Knicks. The Knicks were chasing the Heat that year in the standings.
Did they have some guy named LeBron?
Yeah. I'm gonna mention LeBron. You think? I know you're a big NBA guy. Who's the GOAT, LeBron or Michael Jordan?
Michael Jordan.
Okay, that was fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not close.
Really?
It's not close.
People will disagree with that.
So give me your reason for why LeBron's the greatest.
I'm not on, like, I don't feel as passionate about this topic as other people because, like, I think there's different players and, you know, different generations, different games.
Sure.
I think that, you know, LeBron's durability is definitely a thing. Jordan took a couple of years off. LeBron started playing at a younger time, and I don't think we should discredit, you know, finals appearances because it's hard to win 3 straight playoff series, and LeBron's been to, 10 finals? 11 finals? I think it's 10. In that range,
so 10,
he's won 4 championships, and you know he's still not done yet. Also, but I think it's very close. Also,
no, that's fair. Listen, people want to bring up the era, conversation all the time, and they want to say, well, different generations. And then they go to the position of, well, you know, LeBron James wouldn't be what he is without Michael Jordan, and then people say the same thing about Michael Jordan. He wouldn't be the same thing he is without Dr. J, and then Dr. J without Elgin Baylor, and then Elgin Baylor without, Hank Lewis City. So now we're going back to the 1930s, for God's sakes. But look, you still can compare someone in relation to what they've done compared to their era. And that's the way I look at who the greatest in any sport. Like, I look at it and say, well, in the NFL, for example, there's free agency more than there's ever been before. So, you can, it's much more of a throwing game, and penalties are much more, apropos to hitting the quarterback now, and so they're more protected than ever before. So you can't compare Brady to Montana to, Unitas to Sammy Baugh, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can look at specifically what kind of dominant perspective they had, the position they had compared to the rest of their generation, and no one dominated their generation more than Michael Jordan. Like, if I took Michael and LeBron, many people will say, and I can see that where they're coming from in this, LeBron James is a much better player because the game has evolved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you put, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you put, like, for example, like, I'm trying to think of, like, a good player. If you put, like, okay, let's say you put Julius Randle in the 1950s. Like, he'd probably get you, like, 60 a game.
Yeah.
Right?
He'd be the best player in the league.
But you have to compare them to their specific era, the time period in which they played in. And because Jordan dominated his time period in a way that we've never seen before, that's why you got to give it to Michael Jordan.
It's an interesting debate. Last thing about the NBA, we're a little past the All-Star break and heading towards mid-season in terms of games played. Who do you think is going to go to the NBA Finals this season?
Yeah, it's gonna be fascinating. I think the Sixers are the favorites in the East. I know everyone's getting on the bandwagon of the Brooklyn Nets, but if just watching what they did to the Spurs even last night without Joel Embiid, they just look like they were blowing the San Antonio Spurs out of the building, and they did it without the likely MVP in Joel Embiid. And then in the West, I love the Jazz. I love their story. I like the Clippers, even though they had a tough loss last night to the Pelicans. They got walloped. Wow, they did. A lot of W's in that sentence. I would also say you got to go with the defending champions. You can't discount the Lakers at this point.
I think once again Anthony Davis back, because the Suns and Jazz are having really good seasons. I think the Suns are really a piece away from really being a strong contender. For Philadelphia, I think if they can get someone like Buddy Hield or another shooter to pair with Seth Curry and got into Tobias Harris and kind of bring Shake Milton off the bench and give Simmons and Embiid and 3 shooters, I think that makes them dangerous to beat Brooklyn.
Sure. No, absolutely. The Sixers are deep. They are really deep. And I think Doc Rivers is on a revenge tour.
Yeah, I think so also.
He doesn't, you know what I mean? I don't think he likes how that went down in the bubble.
Because
I think he feels like he deserves another shot with that group. Because it was his first time with those guys.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is kind of that's what I didn't like about it. I mean, people want to bring up the Boom 3-1 series. I get that. He did it in Orlando. He did it in LA. And the 2014-15 season against the Rockets, and we know what happened in 2021. He had no business losing that series, and that was incredibly embarrassing. But it was his first time with those guys.
Yeah. And I think that Paul George shot sub 20% in the series, and Kawhi in the second half of Game 6 and 7 really fell apart. I think Doc Rivers got a lot of the blame. I think there was kind of the narrative around the 3-1 thing also, and they had to make a move. I think the Clippers are doing fine now, but I agree that Doc's on a revenge tour. I'll get you out on this. I know for a couple of years you were a world history teacher for a school. Just tell me your favorite part about being a teacher, and then also some of your favorite world history events to teach.
Sure. Just being a teacher and coach, I think the commonality is just having the impact that you have on young people. kind of seeing where they are compared to where they want to be, and to play a role in that, to know that you had some type of an impact in their growth, their development, and actualizing their potential. I think that is an incredibly gratifying, rewarding feeling that you don't get in many other professions. And then I think the coolest thing to teach in world history is just civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to see people that kind of sacrifice for the greater good, whether it were Gandhi, Mother Teresa, MLK Jr., people that really put the best interests of the greater society at the forefront, in lieu of their own personal interests and gain.
Yeah. That's definitely awesome. I love U.S. history. I love world history. I was excited to hear what you said for that. I loved your answer. That's fantastic examples of people like Mother Teresa and Gandhi and MLK. Absolutely awesome.
Thanks, Harrison.
And thank you, David, for coming on the podcast, talking all things NBA producing, and then even some world history at the end.
My pleasure, Harrison. You had some great questions, man. I enjoyed being on. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, David.